Hi, everyone. I'm Meli Chamorro. I am one of the co-founders of Eforia, which is a sex wellness and discovery app.
And hello, I am Elaine Safir. I am the other co-founder of Eforia. And today we're here with Rachel Klechevsky, Eforia's sex therapist.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you so much for chatting with us today, Rachel. We'll be speaking about sex therapy. What is it and how can people benefit from it? We're also having a brunch happy hour today, and it is courtesy of Nasty Woman Wines, which is a feminist, unapologetically feminist wine brand here in the United States.
So let's everyone to today's discussion.
So let's kick it off. Rachel, what is sex therapy and how did you get into this?
So it's kind of a loaded question because getting into sex therapy is actually a personal journey for so many of us. We see the difference in how the world treats people in different ways based on their gender, on their sexuality, and it can affect us in different ways because of our own identities. And so we are kind of looking for answers and going through our own journeys. For me, it was I was really good at researching stuff on the internet and being diligent about getting good answers. And we're talking about 1998 when, this was when the average person just suddenly showed up on the internet, where it wasn't just computer nerds who were all over it. This was everybody was on it. And so we didn't have Google yet, and we needed to figure out how to find our answers. And so I went to an Orthodox Jewish day school where we had zero sex education. And so when there were questions about sex and, what do we do and how do we do this and am I safe? How do I stay safe? They would come to me. I don't know why, but they did. And I made it my business to get them really good information. And some of that, came at a cost, and that cost got me super, super angry. And I spent really the majority of my early adulthood trying to understand, what it is that got people so uncomfortable with the idea of somebody just knowing about sex and sexuality and safety. And then just over time, it was somewhere sitting in the background that I might be a therapist, and then I watched the movie Meet the Fockers. And I was so excited about Barbara Streisand's character being a sex therapist. I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. That's the rest of my life.
I really hope you wrote Barbara a really nice thank you note at some point. Hey, you inspired me.
Yeah, I should.
Another toast up to Barbara Streisand, just because.
Yeah. So that's how I got into sex therapy.
And what does it actually take? You're a certified sex therapist. So it's not like anyone off the street can walk in and say, hey, I'm interested in sex. I'm interested in talking to people. Let me just do this, right? There's actually a course you have to complete, and it's a serious practice.
Oh, yeah. So first and foremost, I'm a therapist. I have a master's of social work. And so any kind of therapy modality would be appropriate to start as a sex therapist. That's the first layer. And then after that, I made the choice to go to school. So I went back and got another master's degree of human sexuality education on a specific clinical track. So not only were we taught how to teach about sex, we were taught how to, provide services for different sexual issues that might arise in our practices. Now there are other ways, there's something called the sexual attitude reassessment. So that's a series of courses that you would take to gather up enough, credits for certification. And then, and then you would do that through ASECT, which is the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. Not everybody is ASECT certified. There are many different ways to be out there as a sex therapist. Mine was to get another degree. So, but definitely do your due diligence and make sure that you feel safe with them.
And I know in our last video, you talked a bit how we live in a sex negative society, which I feel probably, it makes people a bit nervous to talk about sex because of all of those, issues and things that affect people feeling comfortable with their sexuality. So do you see that impact the clients that come and see you? I mean, I imagine that the first session, they're probably really nervous. And so how do you get people to open up? Because, taking that step to come see you is probably a big one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't control people taking the first step. So what I do is I put myself out in the world in many different ways, either through the Eforia app or on my Instagram page, or, so just somewhere. I am, like, if you Google me, I'm Googleable, and I put free information out there so that people can know who I am, where I stand, what my ideals are as far as like sex and sexuality is concerned, so that they don't feel uncomfortable, discussing it with me. And even if they do have some discomfort, they know that I'm not judging them. So that's like the first step to getting somebody to discuss it if they have any hesitation. Usually people come to me to ask me if they're normal. That's the number one question. Am I normal? Am I normal because I'm into this? Am I normal because I don't want that much sex? Am I normal because my orgasms are like this, or I don't have orgasms? Am I normal because of that? Am I normal because of that? So, I mean, for the most part, the answer is yes. I haven't come across a no, you're not normal. I usually say just make sure that there's no medical issue, like if this is such a problem, I can't help you if it's a medical problem. I can only help you once the medical problem is being addressed, to then come back into your body and make choices for yourself. So, that other than that, yes, most of the time people are normal. What they like is normal. What they're experiencing in their bodies is normal.
So if most people are actually quite normal and they just have healthy sexual drives, what do you tend to actually help people with? Like, what's the biggest benefit that sex therapy can provide to someone?
Acceptance and authenticity. Just like, I think the biggest issue that so many people have is that they're just fighting with their bodies all the time. They're constantly in a battle with, I want my body to look this way. I want to be able to have this. I want orgasms that look like that. And I want, like, they keep trying to manipulate their bodies to be some kind of image that they have, instead of really being in their bodies and enjoying them. So that's the acceptance part. And the authenticity part is people are really afraid of what they're actually into. And so helping them, first understand what they might be into, and then later, learning how to go for it and how to enjoy it and appreciate it and ask for it. That's the other part that I have to do, is like, first figure out what you want, and then let's get you to that place.
And so seeing that people, that your clients, most of their concerns if they're normal or not, do you think that they come in thinking they're going to shock you with what they're about to tell you?
Yeah, some of them do. I really do not like to pigeonhole, but 100% of the clients that have been trying to shock me or have been worried if they're going to shock me are straight cis men. They're always the ones that think that their sexuality is so out there that I'm going to be like, oh, this is just too much for me. I can't deal. When most of the time I'm like, yeah, okay, you're like the 8th call I had today about this specific fetish. Like, you're not that absurd. You are as normal gets. But yeah, they're the ones that try to shock me the most. Some people are worried that I might get shocked, which is very different than wanting to shock me. And then when I get to tell them that, like, no, I'm not shocked. I've heard this. I've actually had a few clients that have been through this before. We can talk more about that. It kind of puts them at ease a little bit to know that even if they're not normal, right, in their space, when it comes to me and who I'm talking to, they are. And then I provide statistics sometimes to tell them, like, no, this is not just normal because of my job. This is normal because it's actually the norm statistically in our society. And then I like to break down the word normal and healthy and like what that really means.
I can imagine just hearing that must be liberating if you've been carrying this concern that, oh my God, I'm a freak or this, and then, you know, they come and speak to you and be like, yeah, it's normal, it's healthy. And so that can be such an important thing to hear, and to another reason why it's important to go to sex therapy if you are dealing with these type of issues. I was wondering, have you seen over the last 10 years that you've been practicing a change in sort of the type of clients you're going, or the type of, are people more open? Have you been seeing kind of a shift in society just within your own clientele?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Not necessarily the topic, but how they interact with me in session has changed drastically. When I first started and I would tell people what I do for a living, they would just get so shocked and so surprised. Sometimes they weren't really sure what I did. I had to clarify that I don't have sex with my clients. That's actually against the rules. That right. That there are places, there are professionals that do have sex with their clients. There are like counseling professionals and body workers that have varying levels of physical intimacy with their clients, from professional cuddlers to surrogates to sex workers. And there's many different ways to address that, and also completely open discussion in therapy. I'm a sex work positive sex therapist. I work with sex workers. And so that is always a viable option. And, you know, that is an availability as well. We just have to navigate it very carefully. But that is not what I do. So in the beginning, I needed to really explain the rules and the boundaries of sex therapy and, you know, how it works. Now I don't have to as much. Also in social spaces, I don't have to as much. Like people used to just go right on and start telling me about their sexual problems while I'm at a bar, you know, like, yeah, you know, and it would be really uncomfortable. And I would have sometimes like I would get snarky, which is not cool, where I would be like, so if I was a gynecologist, are you going to put your feet up in stirrups right now and start asking me about your vagina? Like you're not. So
I like that answer, that response. So.
I could start using it because, well, Melly and I, we run a sexual wellness and discovery app. And let me tell you, I've definitely mentioned it at parties or out at the bar, and people suddenly want to discuss their sex lives, like immediately, like, please, let's get into my deepest kink. I'm like, yes, I'm definitely interested, and I want to hear this, but also, oh my God, my grandma is over here, like, calm down. So
Yeah, so I can only imagine.
Yeah, it almost feels like there's a little bit of like repression about sexuality that we have in our society. So when you give somebody the permission to discuss their the sexuality just by like bringing it up as a topic, people are so desperate to have like an honest conversation with somebody who they see as sex positive, that they jump on the opportunity. They like can't contain it. Do you find that?
yeah, I think people who really want to discuss it but don't have a space to discuss it definitely want to. And I find that the people who are so open, they already have some sex positive background. If it's not like fully, you know, figured out and, you know, has some kind of like philosophy behind it, they're already on the journey to sex positivity because they're itching to talk about it. And they know that just because they met people that don't want to talk about it doesn't mean that there's something wrong. So the first person that makes it available, they're just like, you know, ready to spill the beans.
I also find that it's interesting in this society, there's a lot of like success theater, especially with social media. You want to like project yourself as super successful and you have like the cutest house and the best relationship always. And I find that there's also like a little bit of performative sexuality that comes along with it, where like men feel the need to, you know, have an orgasm every single time you have a sexual experience. Women feel the need to like, you know, kind of present themselves in the way that they might have seen in porn films, just to, you know, see, you know, show this like image of successful sexuality, which is really not the case, right? Like there's no right way to have sex. There's no successful way to have sex except whatever works for you and your partner or partners at the time, right?
That's accurate. The only successful, you know, sex that you can have is enthusiastic, consensual, communicative, you know, like being in touch with your body, being aware of your body, and not having any, like, not attaching any weight to it that doesn't need to be there. So, you know, some people have difficulty with orgasm. Some people can't orgasm for a number of reasons. Not to say that they're broken or that it's impossible, but at that stage in their life, it's not happening for them. For whatever, you know, whatever's going on, you know, maybe it's medication, maybe their body's changing and they're not used to it, maybe they're stressed. There's so many reasons why orgasm is not happening. And instead of attaching stuff like, you're not attracted to me, or, you know, I want to make you do this so that I can feel like I did a good job, you know, and making it very selfish and self-centered. You know, if we just eliminate all of those attachments to orgasm and just letting it be what it is, we probably would not have as many issues with orgasm to begin with, but also we would be having much more intimate and connected sex with our partners. Pleasure is pleasure. It doesn't have to always have a goal, and probably shouldn't.
I love that. Pleasure is a really good slogan in general. I wonder also, how do you find that a lot of the times, or some of the times, people come into your practice and they want to discuss sexuality and they think they're going to be talking about physical things, but ultimately it ends up being about the psychology and about the emotions and about repressed trauma and like relationships, and actually has nothing to do with your physical body parts, but it's really like you have to fix your world outlook or figure out like some trauma that you haven't resolved in order to get the physical parts to fall in line.
Yeah, that's like 90% of it. I only had one client that all they came for was technique, and that's really all they needed. Like, technique was where it was at. They were like, I just don't understand this enough. I'm open, I'm ready, I'm excited. And it was like, that was one client in 10 years. Most of the time I have to address their obstacles. I need to know why, you know, like why this has been difficult for them. What brings them here? You know, why is this painful for you if medically you're fine, right? Like what is going on for you? And yes, you're going to be discussing their history with sex and sexuality. You're going to be discussing their relationships. I mean, most of the time, you know, people come to me while they're in relationships already, and it's fractured because sex is not great. And so, of course, I'm going to have to look into their history and into the relationships history, like what's going on between the two of you, or three of you, or four of you. It's usually two. The three or four tend to communicate better about sex when they're together. Not to say that that is, you know, a complete safe generalization, but it's a tendency.
And seeing as you say that you a lot of times get people that come in that are already in relationships, do they sometimes come in thinking it's going to be like marriage counseling, but really, you know, how do you kind of distinguish between the two?
So I do relationship therapy, and so I don't have to distinguish between the two, because I just don't see how you can work on a relationship without addressing sex. Like, I just don't see how that's possible. Sex is usually the symptom that brings people into therapy anyway. So for me, it comes together. It's part of the same process. And the second I open that door to discuss sex, I hear everything. Like, that's when you really hear what's going on. That's when you hear, oh, this is why we knew we had a problem, because sex hadn't happened in months. But now that that was way in the beginning before I flat out said that I was a sex therapist. Now that I do, people already come to me, you know, with their sexual issues, knowing that they're going to be discussing other stuff like their relationships and how to interact in them.
So you've been working with us with Eforia, which was formerly Do You, but we just recently rebranded, for quite a while. We're obviously so thrilled that you're part of the team. You know, but before when we were thinking like we definitely want to have an amazing inclusive sex therapist, we saw that there really were a lot of heteronormative sex therapists out there. And when we saw that you work with, you know, polyamorous couples, that you're very sex positive in a very inclusive way, we knew that you were perfect for the Eforia team. Do you feel that there really is an issue in, you know, that you've gotten maybe clients that they went and they were maybe judged by a sex therapist, even though that shouldn't be the case ever?
You know, I definitely have clients that were judged. And I do appreciate that, like, you sought that out for your app. And that makes me feel, again, more a part of the team, right? Knowing that that was part of your process. So most of the sex therapists that are in my circle are very, you know, intersectional, you know, sex positive, and they will tell you that, you know, they'll tell you if they have limits. So some of them will tell you, like, polyamory is just not where it's at for me. I don't know how to navigate that. I will give you a referral. So that is the, you know, most ethical way to be a therapist, is if it's not in your wheelhouse, you refer out, or you tell them and you let them make a choice. If you say, like, I know a little bit about this, I'm not really sure, you know, how this is going to go. I can get a supervisor to help me navigate it, but I want you to know that I'm learning this on the job. So that gives the client informed consent, which is really necessary. I haven't found it much from sex therapists, at least in New York, that they are heteronormative. But I did find a lot of, you know, not as poly-friendly as they say sex therapists. So, like, they'll say that they're poly-friendly. They'll say that they've done the reading and, you know, like, know all of the greats of, you know, the polyamory research. But at the end of the day, they're still kind of enabling a heteronormative and, like, mononormative concept, which is kind of shitty, you know, like, you don't want to be the client who's teaching the therapist that you are valid, and that what you want is valid. So there is some of that. I think that it's changing a lot, especially now that one of the greats, Ellie Sheff, created a certification course on polyamory and how to be competent in polyamory. I haven't checked it out, but I used Ellie Sheff's research for a big part of my own work, so I'm inclined to trust it.
That's great.
We've noticed one of the things that this just made me think. You said in New York City, there's, like, more access to, like, inclusive sex therapists, just in general, to sex therapists. Whereas if you're not in a big metropolitan area, you may not have this available. And one of the nice things about the world kind of going to remote work and to video is that suddenly things that used to be able to only be available in big cities or in, like, more populated areas are now available via telemedicine and video chat to people all over. So as the world is shifting towards video, have you started seeing any clients outside of the New York area and like helping people who normally wouldn't have this access?
Right. So this is also kind of a controversial topic. We were able to do remote sessions for a long time. There have been HIPAA compliant apps that made that available, like Doxy, and even Zoom has a HIPAA compliant option. But the way that it worked was that we weren't allowed to work with a client who was located in a state where we didn't have a license. And this is what made me reject the Association of Social Workers. It's like the ASWB. I was like, I'm no longer going to give you money, and I'm no longer going to use you as my system. I have my master's of social work. I have my license, but I'm going to function as a coach because I think it's bullshit that you force us to pay so much money to get licensed in all the states. You know, the work is the same across the board. You know, you're either competent in working with that population or you're not. But it's not like the law. You know what I mean? It's not like every state has their own therapy, right? It's therapy. It's the same shit everywhere. So why do I have to spend $500 to $1,000 per state? That's ridiculous. So I was always seeing people in other states. I was also seeing people in different countries. But ever since COVID, the APA and the ASWB and a bunch of other mental health, systems made it okay to practice cross-state virtually, but I think that they're creating a limit around it. It's whatever. It's controversial and it's a problem, and I think that they all need to stop gatekeeping because that's like, it's unethical. I think it's unethical by their own standards, but that is me and my big mouth. So
no, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's if someone is struggling with something in Wyoming and they don't have access to a sex therapist in their area, you know, and they feel comfortable going to another, I think that they should be allowed. So I'll sign a petition if you send me one for us to help, you know, make it more fair. But well,
we saw the same stuff, and it was eforia too, right? Like we thought that our biggest app users are going to be people in major metropolitan areas around the world, like in London and New York and San Francisco. And actually, it turns out a lot of the people who use the app are the people in communities which just don't have a ton of access to good sexual wellness and discovery resources. And so we see like huge clusters of people on the app in the middle of America, in the Middle East, in India, in places which traditionally were a little bit underserved for sexual education and like high quality erotica content.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look, Pornhub had their map and they were like showing, you know, who's using Pornhub the most, what are the extremes in each of the states, and it like the most extreme, you know, searches and the most use is always happening in these remote areas. And what's really scary is that they also don't get sex education. And even though Pornhub makes sex education available, I just don't think that these people are going to get it from Pornhub.
yeah. I mean, so that causes such an issue, because if the only type of sex education that's available to you is porn, then that's setting a completely unrealistic view of what sex actually looks like and is supposed to be.
Oh yeah, and it's also really harmful for a number of reasons. It's harmful to the people that, you know, like that are being like the people who are having sex with those that are being educated this way. That's first. Second, the actual, you know, people in the films, right? The porn stars themselves, they don't get paid enough. It is not ethical. There may not even be informed consent on a lot of these videos. So like they just know that they're showing up to have sex. They don't know what's happening, and they don't really get to say, I don't want to do this. I don't want an out. Like, you know, they don't have those options depending. Obviously, there are different production companies that do and post on Pornhub, but it's not a safe place. Like, it's not safe for anybody. I would actually recommend people look up ethical porn, like the Violet BK, and I just can't think of any others right now, but I could definitely send it as a source for you. But
Make Love Not Porn is another one.
Sorry?
Make Love Not Porn as well.
Yeah. And you could find really kinky stuff on ethical porn, right? That's not, a lot of people are worried that they can't find like kinky and raunchy things. No, you could find really kinky stuff out there. But like Hot Movies for Her is another one. It's just ethical. It just means that the actors are all in on it and they get to say what they want to do and not want to do, and they get paid better. Like,
I know. Why wouldn't you support a good thing?
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing that we've learned doing research into human sexuality is that different genders actually tend to be turned on in different ways. So women and non-binary folks actually tend to be a lot less turned on by like graphic video, visual content, and need like a little bit more stimulation where the imagination is used. So they enjoy reading erotica, they enjoy listening to erotica, they enjoy like playing interactive games, anything that kind of like brings them into the story without actually bombarding them with really intense imagery. Because then again, it becomes really performative and really, what's the word? Basically, sure. Yeah. Where it's prescriptive. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, this is what sex is supposed to be like, which is not the case for a lot of people. Sex can be anything you want it to be. And so it's interesting now that in the year 2020, finally, there's a lot more out there to allow people to discover their sexuality in a way that actually feels more normal and more safe and with a lot less pressure from external stimuli.
Oh, yeah. Emily Nagoski calls that context. That context actually improves our relationship to sex and being turned on and aroused in general. And context actually works for cis men too. I think that we just like don't give them the credit But desire shifts the quality of sex and masturbation for everybody, for like each and every single gender and sex that you have access to. You know what I mean? Like this isn't something that is unheard of. And this is also why, like, you could actually watch porn, but if it's in the context of a movie where you're invested in the characters, it's not going to feel as much of an assault on your arousal as, you know, just like all of a sudden walking into a room with genitals like just fucking each other, right? Like it's completely different. The context is everything.
Do you find that also sexuality kind of changes throughout as you age throughout your life? I noticed that some people just have this idea that like, okay, when you're a teenager, you discover your sexuality and then you're done. This is your sexual identity from now on and forever. But that's actually not true, right? You can actually start, going up and down the Kinsey scale, being attracted to different genders as you age. You can figure out the things that used to be like a kink for you no longer work. And now you're suddenly into different things, right?
Well,
biologically, we progress.
Coming from a person that didn't realize they were gay until they were 30, I would say that definitely it is a continuous spectrum. But yeah, Rachel, I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, it's absolutely accurate. We feel things differently in our bodies every other day. Like our bodies change quite regularly. What worked to get you off yesterday may not work tomorrow. You know, like that's how much we're changing all the time. And so always being curious is helpful. But, you know, to address the idea of sexual orientation shifting, there is this idea of sexual fluidity, which is not necessarily that like you're gay, you're straight, but that you kind of experience sexuality on the spectrum throughout your life. And that you will sometimes find people attractive that you didn't used to find attractive. That also includes people's, you know, genders, but that's not necessarily the case. So sometimes like you might have been really attracted to androgynous men and now you're into really butchy women. Why? I don't know. That's just how it is. Like, but being curious and open is helpful, and it's kind to yourself and kind to the people that you're with. It's really helpful to be able to be honest like that with yourself.
And for my last question, you know, if there's someone out there that they've been struggling and nervous about, you know, something involving their sexuality, whether it's their orientation or a fetish that they are freaked out about, or something that might make them feel that they're not normal or they're broken, and they're considering going to sex therapy, but they're nervous about taking that first step, what would you tell them right now?
Okay, well, the first call is usually free, and nobody's forcing you to say anything, to do anything. You know, this is a conversation, and there's no investment in that other than just being in the conversation. And let the therapist kind of house that for you, keep a safe space for you to be able to communicate. But there's no risk. It's the scariest part is making the call and saying the words when you can. And that's what we're here for. We're here to help you say those words. But yeah, the first call is usually free. So
that's a really good reason to call. Thank you so much, Rachel. That was super helpful, and hopefully it inspires a lot of people to seek out sex therapy and see the benefits, many benefits that they can obtain by going a couple of times or engaging in this as a day or weekly or a year-long practice. So thank you for chatting with us. Check out our other interview with Rachel, where she talks to us about how to stay sexual during times of stress. I know now with COVID, the political unrest, climate change, there's a lot of reasons why you might be really stressed out, and it might be hard to stay sexual. So definitely check out the other video. You can also read Rachel's sex advice column on the Eforia app, or write to her anonymously yourself with any of your questions. And thank you for Nasty Woman Wines for sponsoring our brunch happy hour.
Yeah. Well, cheers, ladies. This was great. And thank you again, Rachel.
bye. Have a great day.
Bye.